Hey guys, I'm Mr. Bojangles. Welcome to the tour of my factory. The location I chose is at the far west edge of the map. This allows me to expand downward if needed, as there is no land below the factory. My goal for this build is to never see a belt, inside or outside of the factory. All the items being brought to the factory are brought by train or by belts hidden underneath the track. Let's head down for a closer look. Here you will find nearly every item I am producing. The purpose of these storages is to have nearly all the items in one place. I can come here to grab items for building new mini factories or crafting items at the craft bench. These storages are fed by the main bus line. When I take an item, the storages automatically fill back up. Here are the parts made from iron, then the parts from steel. Down a little bit further, you'll see the cable and wire products, followed by the parts made from oil. Over here are the electronics. I have some empty spaces for parts I haven't started producing yet, or for future items not yet in the game. Let's take a drive downstairs and see how my main bus works. This hallway makes a full loop around the factory. On the left side is storage containers. That is where the trains make their deposits. Those storage containers feed the main bus as needed. On the right is my main bus loop. The main bus consists of about 50 belts. These belts make a full loop around the factory and are hidden in this compartment. They are in stacks of 6 with 2 rows next to each other, then a space. This space allows me to connect a splitter or merger at any point around the factory. This compartment should never be seen unless I need to produce new parts and then send those new parts to the bus. This is what feeds the storages we just looked at, as well as the buildings on top of the factory that are producing the later tier items. In the center of the main bus loop are storage containers containing the items being produced on site. I have tried to color code these containers to match the items being stored in them the best that I could. When the factory is 100% complete, this compartment will be all closed up with walls, and you will not see those belts. The storage containers connect to the main belt with a splitter and a merger. This allows for any excess inventory to be stored in the containers, then returned to the main bus as needed. The walkway in the center of your screen leads to the hub and the walk-up storages for building and crafting. On the other side of the bus loop, I have another train station and a couple compartments building parts. This is what the storages look like directly below the train station. I have 4 containers per rail. That way, any extra inventory the train brings can still be dropped off at the factory. This compartment is producing electromagnetic rods for the nuclear reactor. They are being shipped by the train to the nuclear power plant. This compartment is producing heat sinks, which are used to make turbo motors here at the factory. I have a little bit of extra space over here. Could be used for producing parts or maybe some extra storage in the future. That brings us back around to where we started the downstairs tour. This is the heart of my recycle center. Items collected while exploring, such as flowers, leaves, and wood, are turned into paint, biomass, or biofuel. A smart splitter sends the items to the appropriate constructor, and then those items are sent to the storages above. This is the recycle center from the top of the factory. I'll deposit some flower petals and leaves so you can see it in action. We'll drop the flower petals in here. You can see them going away. They're going downstairs. Open up the floor here. All the flower petals are being sent to the appropriate constructor. And voila! I have paint. So much better than crafting it by hand. Over here's my garage. I park vehicles in here. I have a storage container full of fuel, has the same system where it's automatically filled back up from the bus line. Now let's check out the buildings on the main level of the factory. These are producing the later tier items and are the cleanest looking productions. This area is producing motors. I have painted the buildings and equipment to match the parts they are building. The parts needed for the assembler are fed from the main bus. There is a layer between the floor and the downstairs ceiling that hides all the belts, splitters, and mergers. There is no access to that area without deleting some floors or walkways. The newly produced parts are sent to the main bus and then used for building even higher tier items, or they're stored in the storages on the second floor. If you look closely, you can see some of the belts and mergers just below the floor, feeding the assemblers. We'll take a quick look at a building with a manufacturer. It has a few additional belts, but with a little bit of thinking and some time, can be done just as clean. That's all I have for the main factory. We'll finish up the tour with a train ride touring the feeder factories and the nuclear power plant. Heading in this direction, we will find everything oil related. The desert area over here has quite a few oil deposits. This is the circuit board factory. Coming up is the rubber and plastic factories. I color coded the buildings to match the products they are producing. Underneath the roadway, I've hidden the belts that are sending the products back to the main factory. We'll stop at the circuit board factory and check that out. The rubber is used to produce the circuit boards. It runs through the circuit board factory, then returns to this belt, which is then fed to the main factory. Now we will head in the opposite direction as the oil. Coming up is the steel factory. The parts it is producing are also sent underneath the rail back to the main factory. The last stop on our tour is the quartz factory and the nuclear power plant. That large purple building is producing crystallized quartz. The quartz node is on top of that cliff. Rather than build the rail on a long slope, I chose to build the factory downward until it met the rail. There, it sends the quartz on the train back to the main factory. I built the nuclear power plant to resemble a real nuclear power plant. It has a couple guard stations, a wall around it, and a couple buildings that resemble offices. Those buildings are actually producing the fuel, which is plumbed under the floor to feed the reactor. I can add additional reactors as needed, but since they produce nuclear waste, I have chosen not to add them just yet. Thank you for watching this tour of my factory. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel to see more videos in the future.